All right, welcome to my video. In today's video, we're going to take this 1939 Ford cab over and head to my house and do its first oil change since this engine was broken in. This is the original engine for this truck. It's a 1939 Ford flathead V8. I rebuilt it totally, put it on an engine stand, had new oil then, of course. Now it's just got a few miles on it. It's probably got more time on a stand than it does on the road. But I did have some carburetor issues that I'm thinking that probably thinned the gas out some. Also, I used 1030 Comp Cam's break-in oil. I want to go to a thicker oil because this thing is running very low oil pressure at idle, which is normal for these 59A pre-49, pre-48 truck flatheads. So today, that's what we're going to do. All right, I'm going to climb up in the cab, do a cold start. This engine has not ran in at least a couple of weeks. So this will be a definite cold start. Give it some choke. So for oil pressure right now, I've got two gauges in here. I've got this quad gauge down here. You can see it's reading between 50 and 100. Between 50 and 100. I've also got this mechanical gauge down here. So it's 75 to 80 whenever I accelerate. Now this thing will drop down. When it gets warm, this thing will drop down to where it's barely off the peg, like it's close to zero when it's warm, which my understanding and reading and talking to guys that do this say that that's pretty normal. But I would like to be able to see some oil pressure. I don't like looking down and the needle laying on the peg for the oil pressure. I'm going to put in some Rotella T4 1540 and also some Lucas oil stabilizer. It's thick, it's supposed to help increase the oil pressure, so I'm going to give that a shot and go from there. Alright, so one of the things I wanted to mention before I forget, it just died. Came to a stop here in the parking lot and it just died, and that's a thing I have. I'm going to change the carburetor out today as well. This thing is, I think this is an old carburetor. It is a 1939 to 41 carburetor, and I think that the throttle shaft may have a vacuum leak. I feel like it's got some type of vacuum leak. This is an old carb that was tore down, rebuilt with old parts, and I feel like it's got a very small vacuum leak somewhere, so I'm going to try to remedy that by another rebuilt carb that is rebuilt from an old core with new parts. So I'm going to give that a shot and see if I can't get rid of this dying issue. I'm going to try to capture the dying issue. Right now it's not warm, so I think it's probably a bad example. I'll try to capture the dying issue on the way home. Alright, it's been sitting here idling just fine for a few minutes. Oil pressure has dropped down to below 0 and 50, and it is showing just above 25 there on the mechanical. It's going up to almost 50. On acceleration. I'm going to see if I can't get it to die just by going and then stopping. Now I'm going to come to a stop, and there it died. The only thing you can hear is my electric power steering made by Famoco. It's the only thing you can hear running there. Uh-oh. I got a dead battery. Alright, so I'm going to try to get home. This thing's on a generator, and it does not like I said, it does not like coming to a stop like that right there. Also, it doesn't like charging the battery, so I have two batteries right now just to try to get me home. Alright, we're doing okay. We are now past all the red lights and stop signs to get to my house. come to a die that time, which is interesting. Check out the oil pressure on the mechanical. It barely comes off the peg when I rev it. You can see right there on the electric oil pressure gauge. Right down here, somewhere right there. She's sitting at 0. Alright, we'll get on. Alright, so let's get into it. I've got the batteries charging, batteries with an S. I'm going to drain the oil and change the carburetor out, and also add some hand throttle linkage that's not existent right now. It's got a port for the hand throttle right next to the choke, but I now have the linkage rod, and the carburetor is set up properly to have, the new carburetor is set up properly for hand throttle. So let's get into it. I'm going to drain this oil. Alright, we're under the truck, but as you can see, they made some really big oil plugs back in the day. Alright, I got her broke loose with some channel locks. I'd rather use a big socket, but I don't have a socket that big. I know this oil's gonna be hot and just ready to pour. Uh-oh. Definitely having a little geyser going on here. Hope my pan holds it all. It was kind of full already, but my drain pan. Alright, here's the engine situation here. I'm going to go ahead and throw this bottle of thick goop here. I'm going to go ahead and lay it in here and let her get a little bit warm, I think. I'll put it right there and see if that does anything. Anyways, that stuff's really thick. Just want it to pour, that's all. Got a little bit of oil bath oil coming down the carburetor right there. That can't be great for it. I don't see any on the manifold actually. It's just now dripping down the carb there. We'll get her wiped off. First I gotta get underneath here and put this oil plug back in. It is tight quarters in here. This thing comes out, but it's not super easy to take out or put back in. I mean, it's doable. Just a couple of bolts here. I think what I'm going to do, it would make it a lot easier to put the oil in. This would normally line up with the hole right here, but the way I had to build this cab and get the transmission shifter to be inside the cab, I had to shift the engine slightly forward, you know, about that much further. You can see right there, probably 6 inches further forward than I normally would have. This is the vent right here with a fuel pump push rod, and also your oil goes into this cap here. And then we have, I put a temperature gauge right here just because I'm kind of redundant on temperature and oil. Temperature and oil pressure gauges. I have 2 of them in both of these trucks. So there's my Wix fuel filter. Got a little bit of debris in there. I've already changed it once. Running an old fuel tank I repaired from the outside. Can't really clean it on the inside because of all the baffles. But anyways, I'm gonna get the oil in here by using a funnel with one of them adjustable squiggly things on the end that you can get down in there. I'll get the oil in that way. I should just be able to pour this stuff. I'll just keep the bottle like that once I get ready to do that. Let it go in there slowly. Alright, we'll see. I don't know if that oil's gonna go down this little bitty funnel hole or not. Kind of doubt it, to be honest with you. I'm just kind of seeing how it's going down this other funnel here. It's painfully slow. The thing is, it goes down really fast through this funnel, but the opening in that PCV or whatever you want to call it, that vent tube, it does not like let it go down fast through it. So alright, I got the oil in. I just did it. To put the oil in, I just filled one of these cups up at a time and dumped it in slowly. It was only 4 quarts, so it wasn't that bad. And then for this, I'm just dumping this in slowly. I know it'd be better if it was thinner or warmer. It's a little bit cool out here. But anyways, it can't go down this tube very fast anyway, so it's just one of those things that has to be slow. Anyway, I'll save you from all this action right here and let you know when it's done. Alright, while that's wrapping up, that Lucas high mileage oil stabilizer. It's thick, it's a quart. I put in some thicker oil than what these things normally called for, so I'm hoping to get higher oil pressure whenever it gets hot. As you guys saw earlier, this thing gets down to 0 oil pressure. I've got 2 different oil pressure gauges in here. This is a mechanical. This is actually oil going to the back of the gauge here. And then this is electric with the sending unit right here. And this here is the line where a mechanical oil pressure gauge goes up to. This thing has no oil filter on it. It didn't come with one. They are back in the 30s. They were actually an option. I will eventually put a oil filter on here. The later model 40, I think it's 41 and later, 41 to 48, 41 to 47 model C cab over engines, COEs, have a built-in housing here for a removable oil filter cartridge. These things didn't filter very well, in my understanding anyway. They didn't filter as high a percentage of the oil as the newer model engines today. So right now it does not have an oil filter, which is not uncommon for a flathead. I went from using 10W30 to using this Rotella T4 15W40, which is a little bit thicker when it gets warmer, and also adding this Lucas oil stabilizer here, which is super thick. Hopefully that will help get me some higher oil pressure at idle. I just want to see a little bit of oil pressure at idle, that's all. Don't like it to be 0. Next thing I'm doing today, in addition, once I get this thing, the oil drain down in there and get it situated, I'm also going to be pulling this carburetor off and installing a newly rebuilt carburetor on it. This carburetor right here was rebuilt with mostly old parts. I'm going to put a old carburetor on there that was rebuilt with new parts. This thing has a vacuum leak in it somewhere, I think. Whenever I come, it runs fine, starts fine, but whenever I come to a stop after running for a while, it just dies every time. Every red light, every stop sign, every fence I have to go through, when I come to a stop, it dies. So my goal is for that to not happen anymore after today. And I'll show you the carburetor that I'm putting in it. Got it right here. Get out here in the light. There it is. Just have this bag over it to keep the dust out of it. But I'm hoping that this does the trick. I have done everything I can think of, and I've followed all the advice of some of the older guys that do this much more than I ever have. I have adjusted the float. I've set the air idle mixture screws, played with the timing. I've done everything that I can, and still dying. So I'm thinking that there's a small vacuum leak that I have just not identified yet. And I know there's a chance that this newly rebuilt carburetor may not fix the vacuum issue or whatever issue that I'm experiencing that's causing this thing to die every stop. But if you look right here, this carburetor is missing the fixture for the hand throttle. The hand throttle should be a rod, just like this rod right here, that goes to the choke. Here's the hand choke. Here's where the hand throttle goes, which is kind of like cruise control back in the 30s, I guess. But you can actually idle it up, idle it down using the hand throttle. This thing's missing the adapter there. And this one, there's the adapter on the newer carburetor. And this model, the carburetor is exactly the same as the one I've got on it. So this is the exact carburetor as what I have on that one. But this one, it actually has the hand throttle adapter on it, which it should have had originally. All right, let's get this carburetor off here. Get in here and make some sparks. I got a mark here. I got a mark here. I'm gonna cut this off, cut that off, and weld those two together and make that one length. All right, I cut these off. I'm just gonna take them over to the grinder real quick and grind those a little bit. And then I'll get in here. I'm gonna clean that up because it has a little rust on it. I like using original parts when I can. I've got an original throttle rod, but they get really wore out. There's a spring inside there, and I'm gonna paint it anyway, so I'm just gonna weld this new piece to it. So I wanna make sure that this holds a good grasp on that linkage on the side of that carburetor. So they'll be welded like this here. So that's how I need it right there. Now I'll clean it up on the grinder, but that should be good enough. All right, so I got it ground down pretty good, got it painted. Got the little rubber grommet on here, and that's how it slips right there. I'm gonna add a little bit of oil on this part of the shaft here so it slips through this rubber grommet really well. and then this will hold it in the hole. Hopefully the length works out and we'll be good to go. Not really sure I understand the hand throttle thing here. It might not work in this application because I have to have a return spring, pretty heavy return spring right there. Well, I say that. I had to have a heavy return spring on my old carburetor. I think what we need to do here is just crank it and figure out the return spring and all, because the last one, it would not, in order to go back to a normal idle on my other carburetor, I had to have a heavy return spring. Having a heavy return spring does not allow the hand pull function to work here. It pulls it right back. Pulls it right back to where it wants to go. I do have a return spring on the pedal over here. So maybe I don't know, maybe I won't need the return spring over there anymore. We'll see. I guess we'll crank it up, see what happens here. I need to hook my battery back up. I've had the battery charging because my experience earlier today, battery was drained. I let it sit and idle for a bit, and I think that it drained it because this thing is a rebuilt 12-volt generator, not an alternator, and it doesn't have very much output, so it drained. Voltage looks better already after charging here since we've been doing this. I guess I'm gonna fire it up. I got the oil in. The oil plug is back in. I don't see any oil leaking, so we have oil. Let's fire it up. May even let it idle a bit and see how the oil pressure does. So if you remember, we have two issues we're trying to get rid of here: low oil pressure on a hot idle, and also a carburetor that didn't like to stop. So here we go. Got to get fuel in the bowl there. I'm going to pull the fuse to my power steering so I don't have to worry about losing that voltage. took the return spring off to see how it acts without a return spring. Remember, I said I have 2 return springs. I have one at the pedal over there, and I have one right here to make it work on the last carburetor setup. Here it didn't go back, so that's the reason I had this one on there to begin with. Idling at like 1,000. I got it now to about 800 or 900. Right there. I like the way it sounds there. Probably at about 7. My tachometer here reads 0 and then 1,000, so I'm only able to estimate, what it's at. I have a different tachometer, but it's in my other building right now, so I don't have it here. I guess it's ready to test drive and see if it's still dying or not. I guess first, let's see if it cranks back up though. Still not really warmed up, and I've never seen this thing break 130 degrees so far, but I only have 14 miles on it. Right now oil pressure is dropping. Earlier when I cranked it on cold, it was about 50 for that new oil. Right now it's a little bit less than 25, so still have low oil pressure, but hoping I can keep it at least around no less than 10. I don't know why. I just kind of want to see some oil pressure there, that's all. But oil pressure doesn't equate, no oil pressure doesn't mean the oil's not flowing. So I'm well aware of that. See how easily she restarts. I'm not going to use any choke. Not going to use any throttle. Pretty good. Guess we'll give her a run. All right, I think what I'm gonna do is clean up a little bit here, and then running around the neighborhood here just to see if I've gotten rid of the dying issue. This is an old oil bath air filter instead of an air filter that actually uses filtration stuff, screen and fabric. This thing actually uses oil. Yeah, look how much oil is down in. And this is the reservoir right here. There shouldn't be that oil shouldn't be down in there. This thing has to have, I did patch up one leak that I found by looking at light coming through, but I bet I have a very minuscule leak in there somewhere that I need to figure out before putting this thing on there. Or at least putting it on there with oil in it. I just don't think it's a good idea to have all that stuff potentially going down into the carburetor. What I have decided to do, I have decided to put this thing back on without the oil in it. It still has filtration, like a wire, like a kind of like Brillo pad type stuff. So I'm going to put this on there with that. Have the air somewhat filtrated and not run the risk of dumping that heavy straight weight oil in these oil baths straight down that carburetor. Alright, I'm gonna climb into this thing and test drive it here in the neighborhood and see if I fixed it with the new carburetor, and we'll see how the oil pressure thing turns out too. But right now I just really want it to not die anymore when I stop it. May actually be at about 500, not 700. Have my dual battery system hooked up, just in case. So I'm going to come to a stop. Hey, it did not die. First time ever. Coming to a stop, more of a sudden stop, did not die, which is awesome. That's what I wanted. I need to run back by the house and shut the garage door, and then we'll get on the road and take this thing back to the building. Hit second gear. In a second, I'll come to a sudden stop here before I turn in. Did not die. Good deal. It's really a bad combination having one that dies every time you stop, especially on a generator that doesn't put out very many amps with electric power steering. So it's kind of a bad combination to have one with electric power steering and a rebuilt generator that doesn't put out, I think it's 40 amps is what he told me it puts out. I forget how many RPMs, but that was at like 2,000 something RPMs, which I would really rarely be at. So when this thing's power steering is running like it is right now, when I'm sitting at idle, it's eating that battery life up. So that's the reason I have two batteries on here. I'm just going to have to keep a battery charger, a battery tender on this thing all the time until I figure something else out. But on my other flatheads, I'm able to use a different alternator. The configuration of this flathead with the original fan on it. This is a heavy-duty double pulley truck flathead from 39. My other two flatheads, 8BAs, I'm able to use a Power Master. I think it's Power Master is the brand. It's an alternator that puts out like 75 to 100 amps depending on what speed you're at, what RPM you're at. So they're a modern alternator, 12-volt alternator. This is literally just a rebuilt generator with a 12-volt regulator on it. It just doesn't have enough amps to put out anything. I don't have a stereo. I've got headlights, blinkers, and electric power steering, so it doesn't draw much, but it's drawing, and that's the problem. So let's get on the road. All right, we're gonna get back on the road here. Take it back over to my storage. Probably gonna have to adjust that idle up a little bit whenever I get there, but at least by then it'll be warm. I can get a proper adjustment on it. I'm just so happy it don't die every time. oil in there, plus that Lucas stabilizer. So now that I'm coming to a stop here, let's just see. Yeah, it looks like it's laid over a 0. But at least this thing's not dying. It's got one thing fixed. So I think this other, the oil pressure situation, that's just I think that's just the nature of this older model 59A style flathead. Alright, that's going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing, and thank you to everybody that has subscribed to my channel. I sincerely appreciate it. Today we got the vacuum issue resolved by replacing the carburetor, and got new oil in there. Didn't resolve the no oil pressure at idle, or at warm idle, or warm running at that. But we resolved the other issue, and I feel good about knowing that oil pressure doesn't mean oil flow, and also knowing that we do have good oil in there right now. So anyways, thank you again for watching.